If you're buying real estate in Canada, you're probably worried about the market, interest rates, or finding a good tenant. But the biggest threat to your dreams of sitting back and letting the cash roll in is actually the professional help you hire. This is the real estate version of the horror movie in which the killer lurks outside the house. But while you're staring out the window, the guy you hired to protect you creeps up on you and stabs you in the back. I learned this the hard way, and it cost me thousands. I'm going to share 5 ways I got kicked in the face in hopes you can avoid making the same mistakes. Mistake number one, I hired a property manager who embezzled from me. When I bought my first property in Canada, a single family house with a legal basement suite in Calgary, I hired a property manager because I live in Toronto. I spent weeks vetting these guys. I went with Rent Perks because they had lots of 5-star reviews, media coverage, and awards lauding them as a leading Canadian startup and cutting edge prop tech company. They even had the stamp of approval from KPMG, a reputable global consulting firm. Nothing reassures you like a KPMG logo, right up until you find out their definition of cutting edge prop tech was a Google sheet. I basically got burned by the fire festival of real estate. Instead of a luxury villa on a private island, I got a FEMA tent and a very confused assistant to the CEO. I fired Rent Perks because they were charging fees I felt were excessive and failing to collect utility payments. At first, I thought they were just backlogged, and boy, was I wrong. The assistant to the CEO told me that the tenants had defaulted on their utility payments and that Rent Perk staff sent them notices, called them, and knocked on their doors asking for payment. I thought it was very suspicious that every tenant in one of my buildings had defaulted on their utility bills for months on end. If one tenant doesn't pay, there's a problem with that tenant. If every tenant in the building fails to pay at the same time, that's not a coincidence. That's a management problem. I hired new property managers and told them to collect on the utility payments that were in arrears. Lo and behold, many of the tenants claimed they'd already paid the utility bills and handed over their bank statements as proof. So, somewhere between the tenant's bank account and mine, that money never showed up. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about where it went. I reported Rent Perks to the real estate regulators in Saskatchewan and Alberta. The company's co founder and broker of record rescinded his license in Saskatchewan. In exchange, the real estate commission there terminated the investigation. That's like a kid pulling the fire alarm during a test because he didn't study for it. Thankfully, Alberta doesn't offer the same get out of jail card for free. That investigation has taken 3 years and is still open. No verdict yet, so to be clear, nothing's been proven. I'm still waiting for that decision. And get this, RentPerks had all kinds of accolades as being a leading prop tech company, and yet they were tracking the utility payments with a Google Sheet I shared with them. So, what I've learned before hiring any real estate agent or property manager, or even mortgage broker, look them up on the Provincial Real Estate Commission website. Had I done this, I would have discovered RentPerks was penalized in British Columbia and in Alberta. The BC penalty is no longer on their record because violations are removed after 5 years. You don't want to hire any company or anyone who's been penalized for anything because there's never only one cockroach. When you see one in the kitchen, you don't think, hmm, only one happened to wander away from his group in the forest. And now I make the property manager either collect a flat fee for the utilities along with the rent or pay the utility bills up front and then collect from tenants afterward. That way, the onus is on the property manager to actually chase down the money. Mistake number two, I let Rent Perks terminate a lease because tenants were rude to their workers. I felt like I was being professional by being accommodating. It wasn't until later when I saw the actual notes that I realized I wasn't being professional. I was the sucker at the poker table who folded because another player sighed heavily. It was in RentPerk's best interest to have as much turnover as possible so they could earn commission from placing new tenants. Property managers should know that in this business, you need thick skin. If you can't handle a tenant yelling at you for having no heat in the middle of winter, property management isn't your calling. You're not serving Japanese tourists at Disneyland. Management should only terminate a lease if tenants are being a nuisance to other tenants, damaging the property, or delinquent on payments. Hurt feelings do not make the list. Mistake number 3. I took possession of a property in November. I know timing can't always be perfect, but I highly recommend avoiding taking possession of a vacant property between November and February. Nobody wants to apartment hunt during a Canadian winter. That's like trying to sell Christmas trees in January. Same product, but wildly different marketability. People with kids don't want to move mid school year, and nobody wants to move furniture through a snowbank. A vacant unit in winter is like lettuce stored in the bottom drawer. You bought it just to forget about it and let it rot. The best time to take possession of a property is in spring and summer. Moving between May and September is less disruptive for families with kids, and college students want to move before school starts. Mistake number 4. I didn't verify the actual utility bills on an eightplex in Edmonton. I bought this 1-year-old property that was already fully leased. I reviewed the seller's operating statements, but I didn't look at the actual utility bills. I was so focused on the deal, I completely missed the paperwork. The real estate version of buying a car because you love the test drive and never looked under the hood. It was a classic rookie mistake and it cost me thousands. When I switched the utilities into my name, I discovered the seller was never billed for water on 2 of the units. Somehow the city let it fall through the cracks. So the operating expenses the seller showed me were lower than reality once I fixed the issue and started paying the water across all 8 units. Operating statements are like a diet on paper. Looks great until you compare it to what people actually eat. What would I do differently? If I ever take over a fully leased building again, I would make the seller show me actual utility bills from the past 12 months as part of my due diligence. No bills, no deal. Mistake number 5. I didn't request move-in reports from the existing tenants beforehand. Same story as mistake number 4. I was so focused on the deal, I missed the paperwork. It's a classic rookie mistake that cost me thousands. When I asked the seller for move-in reports afterward, he said he didn't have them and I had to get them from the property manager. The property manager told me she had no obligation to give them to me because I wasn't her client. That's like finding out your new gym membership doesn't include access to the weights, but only after you've already signed a year-long contract and showed up in your Lululemons. I probably could have put more pressure on the seller and gotten my lawyers involved, but I didn't. As the saying goes, you have to pick your battles. So when the tenants moved out later on and left damage, I had no baseline documentation to go by. Without a move-in report, proving pre-existing damage versus tenant-caused damage is impossible. It's like trying to prove who's at fault in a car accident with no dash cam. You just have 2 people agreeing there was a collision, but each person blames the other. I couldn't legally deduct repairs from their deposits. What I would do differently now. Ask the seller for every scrap of paper they've ever collected on the tenants. Move in and move out condition reports, applications, credit reports, background checks. Basically become the world's most annoying scrapbooker before removing your conditions. If the seller refuses to provide them, I would kibosh the deal. And I would have my real estate agent inspect each unit and get tenants to sign the report. I would photograph and video every unit at possession. If you can't prove what changed, you can't hold anyone accountable for it. So to recap my 5 biggest mistakes. 1, hiring a property manager without checking their record with the real estate commission. Remember, there's never only one cockroach. 2, letting the property manager terminate a lease just because tenants offended them. 3, closing during the slowest rental season without planning for it. 4, trusting operating expenses instead of checking the actual utility bills. And 5, not securing all move in documentation for existing tenants when I took over a fully leased building. Looking back, these were all massive headaches. My own personal fire festival several times over. But that forced me to build the system I use today. If you want that system, the same checklist I use so I don't get kicked in the face again, I will send it to you for free through the link in the description. And what property management nightmare stories do you have? Please share them with me in the comments section. And thank you for watching. I hope this information was useful to you.